So right now, the United States and Iran are fighting a war of attrition. Um, the United States is trying to degrade Iran's military capacity, and Iran is economy is a Ponzi scheme. It is dependent on the GCC investing in AI and tech stocks, in startups like Uber in order to finance. So the most vulnerable city and often the most glamorous city in the GCC is Dubai. And for many years, Dubai has been very successful in cultivating. So I actually don't say the real power base is Israel. What I say is that the real power base are a collection of secret societies that have an eschatological view of this war. And these secret societies.
I think the idea that this is all part of a plot to bring back Jesus Christ. Look, there might be some people out there that carry such a phrase. I think it's highly unlikely, unless any evidence emerges to the contrary, that they are.
So we've got Professor Jiang sitting down with Piers Morgan, and this guy predicted Trump would win, predicted Trump would go to war with Iran, and now he's saying America's gonna lose. And here's the thing, he's been right about everything so far. Like literally everything. 2 out of 3 already confirmed. And now the third one's playing out in real time. But wait till you hear how he thinks this ends. Because it's not just about military strategy or oil prices. This dude goes deep, like secret societies, ends times prophecies, the whole 9 yards. And Piers is sitting there trying to figure out if this guy's a genius or completely insane. I'm not even sure myself yet. But one thing's for sure, you need to hear what he says about the Strait of Hormuz and what happens if it stays closed. Because if he's right about this too, we're all screwed. Let's get into it.
Theorist, best known for his popular predictive history YouTube channel, where he applies his systems of analysis to the past in order to predict the future. Back in 2024, he predicted that Trump would win the presidency, that Trump would go to war with Iran, and that the US would lose that war. This has sparked a flurry of interest in both his work and his rather colourful adjacent opinions. Professor Jiang joins me now. Professor Jiang, thank you very much indeed for joining me on Uncensored.
Hi, Piers.
Let me start with these 3 big predictions, because you've been proven obviously completely right about 2 of them, and the third one is now unfurling before our eyes. Are you confident that you'll be proven right with the third prediction, that Iran ultimately will prevail in this war?
Right. So right now, the United States and Iran are fighting a war of attrition. The United States is trying to degrade Iran's military capacity, and Iran is trying to strangle the world economy. And it turns out that Iran is putting a lot of pressure on the GCC. And I think at the end of the day, the United States will be compelled to send ground forces. Once the United States sends in ground forces, there's no turning back. It's all in. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. It'll be another Vietnam for the United States, because Iran is a mountain fortress. And the United States right now doesn't have the manpower, the manufacturing capacity, and the political will to fight a long war of attrition on the ground in Iran.
Right, so I think because of what you've said at the end there, it's highly unlikely that Trump would commit ground forces, because he's always pledged not to, and I think he would see the inherent danger of that. So if he doesn't commit ground forces, how do you see this war playing out?
Well, right now, if Trump doesn't commit ground troops, he does have a variety of options. The first option is just to simply declare victory and call it a day. Unfortunately, the problem with that is that US bases are still exposed, the GCC economies are still under pressure, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and there are no signs that Iran is interested in peace negotiations. Iran feels as though it has the upper hand because it has the political will and the resources to draw this war out. Now, let's assume that Trump does withdraw from the Middle East. Then what happens is that the GCC nations of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE now are forced to pay a ransom to Iran because they supply the world with their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, but in return they get food. So the GCC nations import anywhere from 80 to 90% of their food from overseas. And so basically the center of gravity shifts from the petrodollar to whatever financial system that Iran wants to focus on. And it could be BRICS, it could be gold, it could be anything. But remember, the problem with that is that the US economy is a Ponzi scheme. It's dependent on the GCC investing in AI and tech stocks.
Okay, so pause right there. Did you catch what just happened? Jang just laid out Iran's entire game plan, and it's honestly terrifying when you think about it. Iran's not trying to win a traditional war. They're playing the long game, economic strangulation. Close the Strait of Hormuz, choke off 20% of the world's oil, and watch the dominoes fall. And here's what's wild. He's saying the US doesn't have the manufacturing capacity or political will for a ground war in Iran, which, that's probably true. We couldn't even handle Afghanistan properly for 20 years. You think Americans want another decades-long war in the mountains of Iran? Absolutely not. But here's where it gets interesting. Piers brings up the obvious point. Trump's not going to send ground troops. Trump's whole thing has been no more forever wars. So what's the play? And Zhang's basically saying Trump's options are all bad. Either he declares victory and walks away while Iran still controls everything, or he escalates. There's no good middle ground here. And if Trump walks away, Zhang's saying the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of them, they're going to have to pay ransom to Iran just to keep their economies functioning. Think about that for a second. These are American allies, oil-rich monarchies, and they'd be forced to bend the knee to Iran because they need food imports, and Iran controls the shipping lanes. And then he drops this bombshell about the US economy being a Ponzi scheme dependent on Gulf investment in tech stocks and AI startups. I mean, that's a spicy take, but is he wrong? If the Saudis and Emiratis stop dumping billions into Silicon Valley because they're too busy negotiating with Iran, what happens to our markets? What happens to the dollar? Jang saying it could lead to economic collapse and revolution in the streets. That's a bold claim, but the logic tracks. If you lose the petrodollar system, if you lose Gulf capital propping up Wall Street, you're in serious trouble. Now, I don't know if Jang's going to be right about all of this, but the fact that he called the first two things correctly means we got to take the third prediction seriously. Because if Iran really does keep the strait closed for months like he's saying they want to, and oil hits $200 a barrel, dude, we're talking about a global economic meltdown, food shortages, energy crisis, the whole 9 yards. And the scariest part is, it's already started. It's been 2 weeks and we're already over $100 a barrel. So the clock is ticking. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think Trump's going to call Iran's bluff? Or is this thing spiraling out of control? Because honestly, I'm not sure there's a good way out of this.
And startups like Uber in order to finance the US economy. If this financing stopped, then the US economy could face collapse. And this means that these young men could not afford their OnlyFans anymore, and this could lead to a revolution in the streets. So the consequences for America would be dire if America were to retreat from the Middle East.
I mean, it seems that the key part of all this sort of economic strangulation, if you like, by Iran is the Strait of Hormuz. We've already seen in the last few hours today that the successor to Ayatollah Khomeini, his son, has come out. Apparently, we haven't seen him or heard from him directly, but there's a statement in which he talks about keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed indefinitely. If that was to happen, what would be the consequences for the global economy, and how soon would we see those consequences?
Well, I mean, the consequences would be dire because cheap energy, cheap petroleum products are the very basis of the global modern economy. So it just wouldn't be jet fuel that would be affected. It would also be food, because remember, food is produced by fertilizer, which comes from the GCC, as well as sulfuric acid, which helps the process of some semiconductor production. So artificial intelligence, food production, global travel are all dependent on products from the GCC. It's only been 2 weeks that the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for almost 2 weeks now, and already we're seeing high oil prices surpassing $100 a barrel. Iran says that they want to move it to $200 a barrel, which signals that they want the Strait of Hormuz closed for months. Now, remember, even if Iran were to open up the Strait of Hormuz, it would take weeks before oil production continues. So I think for the global economy, I think we've reached the point of no return. And in the future, global economies have to commit to a bit of deindustrialization and even mercantilism in order to survive future shocks. So if you go to Southeast Asia, Vietnam and Thailand have already ordered the government workers to work from home in order to save fuel.
You've pointed out that the Gulf Cooperation Council monarchies, the GCC, as you've alluded to several times here, are structurally unusual states because they're propped up by oil, desalination. They don't have their own water supply naturally, and American protection. You say correctly, they were built in open desert with no food security, as you said, 80% imported, no water security, the desalination dependency, no geographic defenses, they're flat, exposed terrain, no demographic cohesion. In places like Dubai, for example, 90% of the population are expats, and no independent security architecture reliant on the US, who have bases, obviously, in many of the states there. If you put all this together, is what's happening now, in terms of the tactics that Iran are deploying, including the threats to desalination, but also targeting, obviously, targeted hotels and airports and so on, going to the heart of what the states there would like to see as the future of their economy, which is tourism, sport, entertainment, clearly designed to scare people away from that. Is this now representing an existential threat, do you think, to the business model of the GCC states going forward?
Right. So the most vulnerable city and often the most glamorous city in the GCC is Dubai. And for many years, Dubai has been very successful in cultivating an image as the new city of London, as the new Hong Kong of the Middle East. And thousands of these millionaires flock to Dubai for the glamorous lifestyle as well as the tax-free aspect of the city. But the reality is that this was all premised on global peace, on Pax Americana, on the capacity of America to project power all around the world and provide security guarantees to the GCC. Now this aura of inevitability and invincibility of American empire has been shattered. And once an illusion is shattered, there's actually no coming back from this. And that's what people don't really appreciate about this war. This war is not just directed at Israel. This war is not directed just at the GCC and the illusion of American empire. This war is directed at American empire itself. And what people don't appreciate is the eschatological aspects of this war, in that Iran sees a moral duty, a moral imperative from God to destroy the great Satan, which is the American empire. And the base of the American empire, of course, is the global economy.
Right. At the heart and the head of the American economy is the President of the United States. You've argued that Trump is not the most powerful person in America, and you've inferred that actually the real power base is Israel. Explain that.
Right. So I actually don't say the real power base is Israel. What I say is that the real power base are a collection of secret societies that have an eschatological view of this war. And these secret societies include the Freemasons, which are now called the Rosicrucians and the Knights Templars. They include Jewish organizations called the Sephardim Frankists, who are embedded in religious movements called Shabbat Lubavitch. And then you have the Jesuits. You have a collection of secret societies. And they believe that a war in the Middle East would start a process that would culminate in the end times and the return of Jesus, the arrival of the Jewish Messiah, the building of a one world government. They have different eschatologies, but a lot of their time frames do align. Where they converge is that there has to be a war in the Middle East to kick things off. This war in the Middle East will lead to the defeat of the American Empire, and this will lead to the culmination of the Greater Israel Project, where Israel.
All right, hold on. Let's talk about what just happened, because this is where things get absolutely wild. Jang just went full conspiracy theory mode. Secret societies, Freemasons, Jewish messianic movements, Jesuits, the Third Temple, the return of Jesus, the Antichrist. All of it. And I know your first reaction is probably the same as Piers. Like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Is he serious right now? But here's the thing, and I'm going to say this carefully because it's important. Zhang's not saying he believes all of this stuff personally. He's saying that they believe it, meaning the people making decisions, the Christian Zionists embedded in the Pentagon and the national security apparatus, the 70 million members of Christians United for Israel. And he's got a point. There's been reporting for years about certain evangelical circles viewing Middle East policy through an apocalyptic lens. John Hagee's organization is real. The influence is real. Whether you believe in end times prophecy doesn't matter if the people with their hands on the levers of power do believe it. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and say Zhang's eschatology breakdown is 100% accurate. Some of that stuff about Frankists and Sabbateans, that's pretty deep internet rabbit hole material. And yeah, it does sound insane when you just rattle it off like that. But the core point he's making is actually more grounded than it seems at first. He's saying, I made predictions based on analyzing what these groups believe and want, and those predictions came true. So maybe their beliefs are influencing events more than we think. And that's actually a fair methodology. It's speculative, sure, but if your speculation keeps being proven correct, at what point do you start taking it seriously? Jang called Trump winning. He called the Iran war. If he's right about the outcome too, then his framework, however weird it sounds, has predictive power. And in game theory, that's all that matters. Does your model accurately forecast outcomes? His has so far. Now, Piers is about to push back hard on this. He's going to call it anti-Semitic. He's going to say it's fantastical. And honestly, I get it. Because if you just hear secret Jewish societies controlling world events, your alarm bells should go off. That is an anti-Semitic trope historically. But Zhang's making a distinction between analyzing the beliefs and actions of specific religious and political movements versus just blanket blaming the Jews. There's a difference between saying Christian Zionist groups have outsized influence on U.S. foreign policy and view this conflict through a biblical lens and saying Jews run everything. One is a political analysis, the other is bigotry. What's interesting is Jang admits he didn't believe this stuff 5 years ago either. He's not some lifelong conspiracy guy. He's a game theorist who kept running into the same patterns and had to adjust his models accordingly. And like he says, he doesn't want to believe this, but the evidence keeps pointing in that direction. Now, does that mean he's right? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. The fact that his predictions keep coming true means we can't just dismiss him out of hand. Because if there's even a 20% chance he's onto something, the implications are massive. What do you guys think? Is Jang reading too much into this, or is there something to the eschatology angle? Drop your thoughts below because I'm genuinely curious how people process this stuff.
To control the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates. Once the Greater Israel Project is in place, it will transform into the Pax Judaica, which is an AI surveillance state. This will eventually lead to the war of Gog and Magog, the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the building of the Third Temple, the return of the Jewish diaspora to Jerusalem, and the arrival of the Jewish Messiah or the Antichrist. So they have the scripted out. And unfortunately, a lot of world events are conforming to this script.
Right. A lot of people say a lot of what you've just said is a load of fantastical baloney and driven by anti-Semitic tropes. What do you say to that?
Look, I completely sympathize with this argument. 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing about this sort of argument and thinking. So what I do is predictive modeling, okay? Meaning that I'm going to throw some theories out there. And then based on these theories, I'm going to extrapolate into the future and see what the predictions are. If these predictions are correct, then my theories ought to have some legitimacy. Now, when I teach, I don't engage in historical analysis. I engage in speculative analysis. And so in 2024, 2 years ago, I did say that this war in Iran would happen, and I provided a lot of my analysis. And a part of my analysis that's very important is the eschatological analysis, meaning that Christian Zionists control the United States. There's a preacher called John Hagee who runs an organization called Christians United for Israel, which has about 7 million members. Christian Zionists are heavily embedded in the national security apparatus and in the Pentagon. There's reporting that U.S. commanders have told their troops that this is a war to bring back Jesus and to be not afraid. So that's my argument. Like, I don't want to believe this, but because this war in Iran is happening, I'm forced to conclude that some of my speculative analysis has validity. Otherwise,
well, I think to be honest, I think the word speculation doesn't quite do it justice. I mean, look, there's no doubt your predictions so far have been proven to be uncannily accurate in relation to Trump winning and then going to war with Iran. But I think the idea that this is all part of a plot to bring back Jesus Christ, look, there might be some people out there that carry such a phrase. I think it's highly unlikely, unless any evidence emerges to the contrary, that they are current commanders in the United States military. But Professor Jiang, you have a big following. Lots of people are interested in your predictive analysis, and it's good to have you on Uncensored. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Piers.
All right, so what did we just watch? Professor Jiang came on Piers Morgan's show and basically said America's about to lose a war to Iran. The global economy's gonna collapse, and it's all part of some eschatological script written by secret societies trying to bring about the end times. And Piers is sitting there like, buddy, you sound insane. But here's the problem for Piers and anyone else who wants to dismiss Jiang. The guy's been right about everything so far. Everything. Now look, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I believe in all the secret society stuff. Some of that's way out there. But the core analysis about Iran's strategy, about the economic consequences of closing the Strait of Hormuz, about the structural vulnerabilities of the Gulf states, that's all solid. And honestly, it's terrifying because it's already playing out. Oil's already over $100 a barrel. The strait's been closed for 2 weeks. Countries in Southeast Asia are already rationing fuel. This isn't theoretical anymore. This is happening right now. And the biggest takeaway from this whole interview is this. Whether or not you buy Jiang's explanation for why this is happening, you can't deny that it's happening. And if it keeps going the way he predicts, we're looking at a fundamental reshaping of the global order. The petrodollar dies. American influence in the Middle East collapses. The Gulf states become client states of Iran. Energy prices skyrocket. Food shortages follow. Economic chaos. And all of it because Iran managed to close one shipping lane and had the political will to keep it closed, while America didn't have the stomach for a ground war. That's the real story here, not the conspiracy theories. The real story is that America might be checkmated. And if Jiang's right about that too, we're about to witness the decline of American empire in real time. Wild stuff. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to MB if you haven't already. We cover the stories the mainstream media won't touch. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.